hadn't been in a corporate setting before. How do you, personally as a CEO, keep this wonderful workplace culture happening? Because I trusted and knew the people around me.
There's no limit to how far you can grow the organisation.
There's a lot of onus that they put on me. Oh, but you've done this and you've built that. I said, yeah, I have. But the continued growth is because of the people that we have working for us.
I'm prepared to let go of what I think I know and replace it with what I now know. Welcome back to the CEO Advantage podcast. I've been very excited, genuinely excited to introduce you to my guest today. Craig Rigney is the CEO of KWY, Kornar Winmil Yunti. Craig is a proud Ngarrindjeri Kaurna man. He has been in charge of KWY for 13 years. KWY is dedicated to overcoming violence against women and children in Aboriginal communities. It's some of the most important work and conversations we have in the country. He's grown that organisation from 2 people to more than 100 people. But Craig's far more than just the CEO of such an important organisation. He's a leader, he's a teacher, and he's one of the most inspirational people I know. So welcome, Craig. I'm really happy to have you here.
Wow. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the introduction, mate. And yeah, I look forward to where we go in this chat this afternoon.
Mate, the most difficult question of the day, I'll kick off right off the bat. What was the first job you got paid to do?
The first job I got paid to do that wasn't related to, family and helping out. I think I was a carpet layer.
Right.
Yeah. I reckon I was about 16, I would say, 16, and did a carpet laying.
Wow.
For one of my parents' friends who just needed a hand and I needed some cash and away we went.
So tell me the story of going from carpet laying 15 to the journey to the start of KWY.
That's a big story.
Yeah. We got time.
Yeah, we got plenty of time. Look, I think I was probably a late bloomer, so I didn't really know where my place in the world was across a number of realms, if you like, the multiverse, as we now know it. So as a young adult in my late teens, certainly not necessarily knowing, I I knew I was Aboriginal, absolutely I did, in a relationship with my dad who's an Aboriginal man, my mum's non-Aboriginal. But really not having a big cultural connection to that point. And that kind of came back later in my 30s where I really wanted to explore what that was. Mm-hmm. So the early years of probably my early 20s, I really, held down a job for 2 or 3 years and then kind of just moved around to those trade assistance types of roles that I was doing, as most young Aussie blokes did.
And was that in Gawler or was that
that was in Gawler and Salisbury.
Yeah.
Salisbury Heights, where I met my first wife, and we were together nearly 20 years living out there. But it was probably more so where I was really looking to, I guess, settle down. So, the maturity level didn't kick in until much later in life. And I think at that point, I was kind of on a couple of journeys. I wanted to know who I was as a male in this country, as an Aboriginal male as well, and trying to reconnect back into the Aboriginal community. So that didn't happen till my early 30s. Mm. And then that kind of put me into a direction of working with the Adelaide City Council as an electrician. Mm-hmm. So working there and doing traffic signal work and public lighting. And I got a bit mouthy one day with the Lord Mayor, Michael Harbison, at the time, but mouthy in a good way. He went to high school with one of my dad's brothers in Gawler, so he knew my family. And I was always busting his chops about, mate, there's 2 Aboriginal people working here and you've got 854 staff. what are we going to do about this? I could see my community members, homeless around the city streets, and felt I started feeling a bit of responsibility for that, and I didn't necessarily know how to handle that or what to do with it. So someone asked me and said, why don't you just approach the Lord Mayor and just have a quiet chat to him when the opportunity comes. So I did that, and it was a bit of tongue-in-cheek. So every time there was an opportunity, I would say, Lord Mayor, when are you going to do something? Where's your employment, Aboriginal employment action plan, or what's your reconciliation action plan look like, and these types of conversations. Well, he obviously got to a point after my tongue-in-cheek and his tongue-in-cheek responses and said, well, I'm going to put my money where your mouth is. So he took me off the tools and brought me into HR and he engaged me and gave me the opportunity, I guess, to change my career forever. And that was to be the Aboriginal Employment and Engagement Officer. So to work on the Adelaide City Council's Aboriginal Employment Action Plan, which was great. I thought that was a great opportunity. I hadn't been in a corporate setting before. I needed to come in and fix some PowerPoints and some lights or do something in those roles, still as a tradie, of course.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting, and that kind of really enabled me to change the way I was thinking, be exposed to the corporate world in such a way where all of a sudden we've got these tools, if you like, and mechanisms such as policies and strategic plans and action plans where I could start to question and build upon what was already existing in Adelaide City Council. So to cut a long story short, I was there for a couple of years. We managed to engage about 30 trainees and apprentices at that time that I was in that role and retain 100% retention while I was there, which was fantastic.
Wow.
And that really, I guess, was where I was cutting my teeth and understanding what some of those younger Aboriginal people, male and female, were going through.
Yeah.
Coming from a similar background, but also, living below the poverty line and struggling and racism and the stereotypes that people place upon us, to be able to really help them have some consistency and some sustainability in their life, and to be role models for other family members and other community members. And I saw some absolute, and as I should, value in that work, but more importantly, value in how those individuals, given half a chance and an opportunity, could really take control and empower themselves. Instead of other people telling them what to do, they were able to take the lead. So they were able to make their own decisions, of course. And that from that point on, I was picked up by one of the state government departments, the Aboriginal Employment Initiatives, I think it was called at that point. So across the road almost in Weymouth Street, where I was doing some similar work with them and said, can you go and sit within another NGO and work in engaging Aboriginal young people in high school and to keep them engaged and looking at getting them into apprenticeships and traineeships and then supporting them in that role as well. A very similar role, without the constraints of that really rigid corporate framework that existed in Adelaide City Council. And I'll come back and talk about some of the negative experiences in there, which also, from a strength-based approach, enabled me to grow and learn how to challenge people in a professional manner.
Yeah, because listening to you talk about challenging the Lord Mayor and sort of being a bit cheeky with the Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor being a bit cheeky with you, you've got such beautiful challenging language that you use most of the time.
I'm certainly the public persona of that would be that.
Yeah, well, it is.
The inside voice, of course, is very different, as we know.
Yeah, but the outside voice I've seen you in public forums where we've been friends for a while. I can see you fuming or your eyes flash and then very calmly use beautiful language that most people who are challenged like that or oftentimes insulted like that don't respond with the incredible dignity that you do, but often leaders in the Aboriginal community respond with a dignity and politeness that is sometimes not warranted by the situation, but nonetheless happens. Where did you start to learn that? Because, and we'll talk about how taxing that is for you as an individual to do that. But when and where did you learn to use language so carefully like that?
I think my lived experience response to that would be as a child when I would visit with my Aboriginal cousins who were darker than me and would be harassed by police just from walking up to the shops to get some fish and chips.
Yeah.
So very quickly I'm like, what's going on here? I grew up in a country town. That's not how we were treated there, so to speak. But yet here we are, in the inner northern suburbs of Adelaide and the outer northern suburbs of Adelaide, where being Aboriginal meant that you certainly were targeted by everybody, but particularly anyone with power and including police, unfortunately. So I remember being a 10, 11-year-old kid and walking, like I said, walking from my uncle's around the shop to the fish and chip shop and being pulled over with my cousins who were of the same age and just being absolutely harassed and demonised and swore at and pushed around by police.
Yeah.
So at that, watching that and watching their reaction, and of course some of them would respond angrily and rightfully so, they're kids, but we were petrified. And as I kind of got older and continued to experience that, I thought, well, we're not going to get anywhere doing what I've seen other people do, where the angrier we got, the angrier they got.
And increase the threat level to yourself.
Absolutely. So that was really embedded quite young.
Yeah.
Through that very unfortunate ongoing incidents and engagement through SAPOL, but not just SAPOL, other regulatory individuals, that operate within the community. But certainly at a corporate or a professional level, I think it was more so that Adelaide City Council experience where it was day one where I came into the HR department and the general manager, I think his role was, I won't mention his name obviously, that I will welcome coming into the team meeting first thing this morning, sat us all down, about a dozen of us, and at the start of the meeting just politely looked at me and said, "Oh, are you feeling all right today?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm fine." He goes, "No, but are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, why is that?" He goes, "Well, you just don't look black enough to be an Aboriginal person. You're looking quite pale."
Wow.
Day one, 9:05 a.m.
Welcome to work.
And here I am in the People and Culture HR department of Adelaide City Council, and this is a greeting I get as the only other Aboriginal person in the organisation.
Yeah, and unfortunately that view persists to this day.
Yes, it does.
I've just recently heard of a young woman who works with a young woman whose mother works with Kirsten, who got a scholarship to a private school, and the teacher suggested she wasn't black enough to have an Aboriginal scholarship. And it's like, how does she still have a job? How does anybody say that out loud? But
it's ridiculous. It's the world we live in, though,
mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we'll cover that a little bit later on. So yeah, that was my first real lesson inside the hierarchical, male-dominated systems that we live in.
Yep.
As a young Aboriginal male, just blown out of the water by this gentleman's comments.
Yeah.
So I asked him to repeat it. I said, "Oh, sorry, sir, can you repeat that? I didn't quite understand what you meant." He goes, "Yeah, you're white. You don't look black enough to be an Aboriginal." Great. So just let me I don't know everyone in the room, so can I just get your names? He goes, what are you doing? I said, I've just taken down the names of the witnesses to your comments that are racist in nature. He goes, you can't do that. I said, of course I can. He goes, but I'm the director of HR. I said, yeah, and I'm an employee here under you.
And you're the one person here that one would have thought knew what
should
the rules.
know better.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Should know better.
Yeah.
Needless to say, that was a very fiery relationship, which, again, I guess that strength-based glass half full response from me is that it taught me a lot, and it really taught me how to be very careful and cautious, but more importantly, not to back down as well. And I guess, that bit of male privilege enables me to do that as a male, even though it was to an older male in a higher position. But it certainly gave me the opportunity to do a lot of learning while I was experiencing that for a number of years. And it got to the point where I had to go back to the Lord Mayor and say, look, this guy, you want me to be able to engage and work with and support 30 Aboriginal people. I can't do it from sitting behind a desk in the HR department. It's not going to work, mate. So I ended up having a meeting with the Lord Mayor, but also the CEO of Adelaide City Council at that point in time. And the three of us come to the conclusion that every Friday I would spend half an hour with the Lord Mayor, and after that spend half an hour with the CE.
Who was the CE back in those
Peter
days?
Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was very open to, we're here to support you. Yeah. And the Lord Mayor obviously was at that time as well, but it didn't go down well in other areas. Because then I was forced to then be interrogated about the conversation that I had with the CE and the Lord Mayor. I refused to give up that confidential information. So, when you talk about bullying, harassment and intimidation, from day one around this to the point where I said, look, if you need me, that I would get phone calls. Here's an example. I would get a phone call from a young gentleman whose shift time started at 3:30 a.m. He'd call me at 2:30 a.m. I'm living at Salisbury Heights and he's living at Morford Vale. And I can't get to work because there's something going on here and I need to get to work. I want to get to work, but my car's blocked in and I can't get out.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'll be there in 90 minutes. So I would just jump up, drive, grab him, take him to work. And of course, everyone at work would talk about that and then it would go up the chain and my boss would drag me in and go, that's not what we do here. So again, I would go, well, hang on. I've got support from the CE. I've got support from the Lord Mayor. We can't be working from this Western construct in the way that you think we can if you want the outcomes for Aboriginal people. And if you've engaged me to do this work, I think I'm a subject matter expert in this area at this point in time. Just let me do what I know will work and everybody will be a winner out of this. Mm-hmm. And that was the language I used and pretty much how I said it. I was ostracised again for that, but just had to keep battling on a day-by-day basis around looking after the Aboriginal trainees and employees that we had. Now, the flip side of that was there was myself and a lovely lady, Sandra, who's still at Adelaide City Council to this day. We're the only two employees plus the new the trainees and the apprentices that then came on. Was it soon become evident to me that every other Aboriginal issue in the city limits was coming to my desk.
Yeah, right.
So homeless people, a homeless Aboriginal cohort living on West Terrace at the time or down the Parklands on South Terrace. Oh, Craig, can you go speak to those Aboriginal people? No, council has 6 engagement officers employed for that. Oh, they're not Aboriginal. That's not my problem. I'm employed here to do this part of the job. So then that started, I guess, another narrative around about, actually, maybe there's an opportunity here for council to engage and employ some Aboriginal people in those roles to work with the non-Aboriginal people to teach. We want people to learn our culture and the ways of engagement to get better outcomes for our community. So that was, I owe a lot to that gentleman. who I learnt a lot from, but more importantly, I didn't learn a lot from him in the fact that it enabled me to learn a lot more about myself and how to act and how to react. It was just, putting barriers in front and being the other angry black person gives people an excuse to disengage and to go, oh, told you so. Oh, I knew it. That's how they all are.
It's amazing though, and cruel, that the people we learn the most from are often the ones we least want to credit with teaching us, right? Because it was the hard way.
Absolutely.
And for listeners to our podcast who you use the word male privilege, and I've Craig and I one of our first meetings was our mutual disdain for and interest in changing male violence against women. Mine was working alongside the police commissioner with the then white ribbon, and Craig working alongside the then police commissioner with KWY. One of the and the notion of male privilege, that was the first time I'd heard that or even really thought of it. It's amazing still how and how often you get pushback on this idea of male privilege or male violence. Well, it happens to men too. It's like, yes, it does, but it happens usually, it's other men doing it to other men. It's all of those different things.
Yes.
But you and I had a very personal experience of your story, and through the eyes of being a blue-eyed white guy standing alongside my friends, where we were at a bar and I wasn't standing with you at the time, but I heard, but we were all together, and our friends got refused service.
Yeah.
And the feeling of, it sounds so, I'm almost embarrassed by it, but I was just so outraged, like, hang on a minute. And you said, shh, we've lived this experience constantly throughout life. And there was, talk about privilege.
Yeah.
There was me again. This is outrageous. You can't talk to my friends like that. And you saying, shh, this is, so the idea of how my white male privilege kicked in was like, you can't. And it was that sense of entitlement that I instantly felt, where you taught me some great amount of humility, going, just by holding a mirror up. So rather than saying, hey, smart ass, this is what happens, you didn't do that. You just sort of said, hey, this is how we live with this all of the time.
Yeah.
And that taught me a lot about, it must be physically punishing because it's for you, because if you're that outraged, as outraged as I was, if you were living like that, it's very hard to regulate that level of frustration, that level of annoyance.
Yes.
And you've had to learn to regulate that, which in CEO land is a superpower, right? If you can, you have to regulate because you're the guy in charge all the time.
Yeah.
So tell me then, you've evolved your skills. You've had the opportunity and the vision, I guess, from the Lord Mayor and the support of the CEO to help you transition your career.
Mm.
You've taken the opportunity to transition your career, come straight up against somebody who doesn't want you to transition your career.
Absolutely not.
And you've beaten them.
Yes.
Beaten them by being successful, not by being anything other than successful. What's the next stage? What happens after that?
Well, that was such a great experience and very foundational in changing my mindset, to also feel safe and confident within myself to stand up to this type of harassment. And at that level, there was no other description for it rather than racism. That's purely racism is what it was.
Mm.
So then as I moved through the state government and the Commonwealth, bouncing around and being poached to look at specific areas around Aboriginal recruitment and retention, but also, again, in that trainee and apprentices type of world that I was working in at that time, I got a phone call out of the blue from a dear friend of mine who was a manager in Aboriginal health in the State Department of Health. Look, we need an Aboriginal man to come over here. We're going to write the Aboriginal Male Health Plan as part of the state national health plan and men's health and women's health, etc. I'm hearing good things. You've obviously been on a journey. Would you love to come and work for us? I said, what the hell do I know about Aboriginal male health? And she said, Craig, you're an Aboriginal male. Okay, fair point. Fair point. So it was really, we know the term now is lived experience.
Yes.
But when we go back 20 years,
that wasn't
it was not a thing. And a shout out to Kim, and it was Kim, and she just said, you're an Aboriginal male. I just want a fresh set of eyes. I just want you in here to. And that was, again, another step, moving into a health landscape, and particularly into a policy world now, where we're looking at what's around, where the gap, so gap identification, service identification, what can we do, looking through an Aboriginal male-specific health response lens. And again, that just gave me an opportunity to learn. And, I kind of, when I look back, I wish I'd worked harder and learnt more.
Mm.
But my hat goes off to Kim and to April Laurie, who's the Aboriginal Children's Young Persons Commissioner now, because she was the director there as well, to bring me into the fold and with some other incredible Aboriginal men and women to do that task and to do that work. So that opened up my eyes again to another level of, what does a policy look like? What's a state action plan in relation to that? But unfortunately, the data void which existed when we started diving into what Aboriginal male-specific health responses there was very few and far between. So we were working on that piece for a fair while, and working on the documentation around an Aboriginal male health plan to feed into the mainstream male health plan and then the overall state health plan. We worked on this pretty big document, and we put it in, and it got trimmed and cut back and rearranged, and literally got spat out the other end, a paragraph or two from a reasonably large document that we'd worked on. And that was a little bit disheartening for me.
A little bit.
Yeah. And again, it was another eye-opening moment going, all right, so it's not just educators, it's not just the police, it's not just shop owners. The government, through my very naive eyes, is also quite racist in nature, because there's nothing here for Aboriginal males and very little for Aboriginal women and children as well. So, and then later in years, and particularly now, I just hear the echoing voices of the elders that had come before me and others for decades saying exactly the same thing.
Mm.
So there was an opportunity that arose where the health department had some very specific funding for some men's health gatherings. And in the meantime, some elders have been talking about starting up an Aboriginal male organisation to create a safe space for Aboriginal men to come and talk about anything they wanted to, really. So the premise was like a men's shed, but it was an Aboriginal version of that. It was a cultural yarning circle, to use that language. And also to support any other Aboriginal men's groups around the state that might be evolving or that might be existing. Now, remember, we'd already done the work to scope out who they were and where they were. So, like I said, there was only a handful at that point in time. And the stars started to align, because at the same time, DHS, which used to be the DCSI, the Department of Communities and Social Inclusion, also had some funding. and they were looking for some Aboriginal men to run men's behaviour change programs for men who use violence against women and children, and also were looking for a training partner to run cultural training through the 97 specialist homelessness and domestic violence services at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going back to the elders and going, hey, there's an opportunity here, and also with another gentleman or numerous Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people, the same mindset and same age as me. And it all kind of just lined up nicely. So in the background, we had the elders and with the help of some other people registering Kornar Winmil Yunti, which is Ngarrindjeri for men working together as an ACO.
So for those who don't know what an ACO is
an Aboriginal community-controlled organisation, so a not-for-profit organisation. And we managed to have all this line up in such a way that then we were able to attract and sign off on the contracts from DCSI, so those two yearly contracts, but also from Aboriginal Health, that we could run the men's camp. Now, I was still engaged as a government employee there, so I had a conflict of interest. But the beauty, I guess, and the understanding of when you've got Aboriginal people working with other Aboriginal people, they understand the complexities at that point in time. So there was a little grant opportunity that went, and I think it was probably $25,000 at the time from the Aboriginal Health Department to KWY. And again, Kim and April said, well, Craig, you're in this space. Help them run that. Help them run the camp. That was in 2011. So we were registered as a ACO in May 27, 2011, which is also happens to be my dear friend Kim's birthday is May 27. So it all kind of lined up wonderfully well. And then shortly after that, I finished my contract, obviously didn't renew it, and was given the opportunity to go and sit in KWY and be the CEO of KWY as an Aboriginal person. And we've never really looked back from there. So it's a very unique...
Gosh, that seems like yesterday.
It does when
you say it like that. 2011.
Yeah. Time flies.
Yeah. In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business.
And yeah, so we had those ongoing yearly contracts. So it was year by year with DCSI right up till 2016 or 17 was the training contract and the men's behaviour change contract. The training contract then ceased, and good old DCSI didn't give us any notice, just didn't receive a new contract or any money in the bank, more importantly. But I am happy to say that under DHS, the men's behaviour change program, it continued. And that now sits as contract management with the Office for Women, who are part of DHS. So we still have that one original contract, and I guess, if you like, lineage back to who KWY, Kornar Winmil Yunti, were in 2011, men working with men. And that was really important. And it still is really, really important for me, and I'm sure for the board members and for the employees at KWY that's where our roots take us back to. And of course, our training consultancy arm now, which is a fee-for-service part of KWY as we diversify our business, is still part of that as well. So what we learnt running the training and building the training and creating opportunities for further consultancy to bring that fee-for-service into the business is quite a big arm of KWY, which is fantastic because it allows me to step out of the CE role from the day-to-day stuff and still do training, which the board are trying desperately to get me away from. But it gives me other opportunities too to work with NGOs, other non-government organisations, not-for-profit organisations, corporates, individuals like yourself, where we can create a space for change and have that opportunity to talk about things. And really, as KWY started to morph into something different, and the reason we call ourselves KWY now instead of Kornar Winmil Yunti, Men Working Together, is because in 2015, Aboriginal women were coming and knocking on the door and saying, can you give us a service?
Mm.
We're not getting the service we want from other NGOs out there. And we said, well, we only work with men. Until I got a couple of the aunties came knocking on the front door and made me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was, you will start working with Aboriginal women and we're going to be your first clients.
So for those who are a little less culturally aware, can you explain to an audience that might not understand the significance of aunties coming and helping redirect your strategy? Can you explain that?
Absolutely. And look, I guess a bit of cultural understanding 101 here. The bulk of Aboriginal culture is based on equality and equity, and everyone had their roles, and we wouldn't have survived for 100,000 years if we didn't as a race of people. But out of that, and predominantly, is a matriarchal society, not a patriarchal society. So when Aboriginal women and elders in particular, so those respected community elders, who in this case were women, said, you will work with us. We, one, were culturally obligated, but also very honoured that they sought us out, where they wanted a intervention or a response that we could offer in the way of working with Aboriginal women who were experiencing domestic family and sexual violence, if you like. One problem with that was we were men. So then we had to engage and look to hire an Aboriginal woman to actually do the face-to-face work very, very quickly. So I approached the board and said, look, with our minuscule savings, I found somebody, let's put them on for 6 months, see how we go. And the board, in their wisdom, agreed with that at the time. By the end of the month, we had 55 Aboriginal women engaged with us. So when people talk about business diversification and how great KWY is at identifying gaps in service delivery and going after that. In this instance, the service delivery was brought to us by the Aboriginal community. So when we talk about that opportunity, from co-designing, making something for the audience, with the audience, that is co-design 101, and that is the opportunity to listen to the target audience that you want to work with and then creating something with them that's for them to get the outcomes that they need. And that was very successful and still is very successful. But of course, we couldn't call ourselves Kornar Winmil Yunti, Men Working Together anymore, because we're not just working with men now.
We went through a similar experience at the same time together when I was running SYC, which was, its original name was Service to Youth Council. And we had people saying, but you're not just working with youth anymore, you're working with lots of people. So we just said, well, let's just call it SYC then. And we had that in common. You, from through a CEO lens, is it fair to say, listening to your story then, that you are almost the accidental CEO in the sense
definitely.
of your vocation and your passion and what you were doing seemed to sweep you along to plonk you in charge of this. You were good at it. You clearly are good at it, and you're passionate about it. You're intelligent. And here you are, almost swept along. You changed your career and it's taken off. And it's more taken you with it than you taking it on a journey. Is that fair? That's, or at least at that point?
Look, I think absolutely you're right. And when I've had to do some public speaking about this topic and you've got 15 or 20 minutes and you've got to give them a timeline and blah, 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 it's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
But this theme has been asked, or this question has been asked of me about that. Not as many times I would have expected. So it's a great question. So yeah, absolutely. It's that accidental CEO, the right place at the right time, I think. Going back to the earlier learnings that I had, and obviously was still going to need to learn and still need to learn every single day to ensure, to keep egos and arrogance in check and to make sure that you're vulnerable when you need to be and strong when you need to be. I think it's a really important part of a CEO. But I certainly didn't envisage that's who I was going to be and certainly didn't envisage KWI getting bigger than the five or so of us that were working. When I talk about in 2015, there were five of us. And then after that experience, when we hired the Aboriginal women's worker and I approached a government department, a Commonwealth Department for funding, and they funded the women's position. And they came back and said, we think you're onto something here. What else have you got? And we said, well, the piece of the pie missing is children. So we want to work holistically. That's our culture. We want to work with the entire family around what their needs are. So we were, again, at the right place at the right time, and there was a national action plan to end violence against women and children. That was the first or second national action plan that came out. So there was an opportunity then to consult and work with the government on what our modelling would look like from a holistic nature. Fast forward 8 months, we won a contract, and we still have that contract. So this is now 2017. And that contract enabled us to hire 12 people. So we jumped from 5 to 17 in 2017.
Amazing.
For a little organisation operating out of a little shed, basically, is what we were.
Trebling in size.
Yeah. And then moving to our little Goodwood Road office, which we thought was fabulous.
Yeah.
And it absolutely was, but we quickly outgrew that. And in 2018, we were 18 staff, and that's when the wonderful Mareka came and joined us.
Yeah.
To where we are today, to over 100 staff.
So we'll come to how successful and you are now, and you sort of it dawning on you that you're the CEO.
Yeah.
Because that's being swept along, and then the dawning of I'm the CEO with all the obligations of being a CEO and all the things you and I have talked about a lot. When you and I first met, we couldn't have been more different in our approach to the world. The part of the world that we both came from in Northern Adelaide wasn't different. Our experience of it was different. But when I first met you, you would have come across a guy that was like, yeah, I want to be a CEO. This is what I choose and have sought and all of those things, and was pretty ferocious about this is how.
Oh, you were driven, not to say that you aren't. You knew exactly who you are, what you wanted, and where you were going.
Yeah, and
which was daunting at the time. I've got to tell you, mate.
Well,
for a fresh fish like me in a very big pond.
Well, I did that. It's funny, that's been said about me a few times, and it always hurts my heart a little bit in the sense of I go, that's not what I meant to happen.
Well,
but
sometimes the persona and word on the street and the grapevine gets in the way.
That's right. I forgot about that because I remember you telling me like people told you to watch out because I was pretty fierce.
Yes, that's correct. That's a very polite way of saying it, Paul, but yeah, that's right.
Well, yeah.
I remember that coffee when you said, oh, mate, let's catch up for a coffee. And what's the Italian restaurant on North Terrace there?
At Parlamento.
Yes, and you took me there for a coffee. I still remember that day vividly. And then we had another follow-up down Rundle Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was probably way more relaxed in the second one than I was in the first one because, I've been warned about this aggressive white guy that's taking over the world and SYC and everything, but you couldn't be further from the truth. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you reached out to me and said, I've heard you say a couple of things. I'm interested. I want to know more about you and KWI and where do you want to be and what are you doing? Showed real interest, and that was the first time that had really ever happened.
It was, and it's funny how your experience of that and my experience of that are so different. Because I heard you speak.
Did you lose a bet?
No, I didn't lose a bet. We have to edit.
You leave that right in there because
Yeah.
that's gold.
Because I heard you speak to us, I reckon, and we were trying to understand what cultural awareness even meant. Like it was starting to come into contract language.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that even mean? And so I remember saying to you, is it all right if I ask you this? Or is it like, I might say something offensive and I just want you to know I don't mean it because I genuinely don't understand what's going on. Am I allowed to ask these questions? And I remember you saying, step number 1, I respect the fact that you ask for permission to do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I genuinely, like I'm owl at sea. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm terrified of not understanding because I'm pretty ferocious. I learn about a lot of stuff. And you showed me something that I was like, I don't even know where to start. And you were really kind to me in saying you're allowed to ask questions. And so I just wanted to have coffee with you and sort of go, I've got so many questions. Where do I start? And it's funny how your memory of it was sort of about what people had said about me. Nobody'd said anything to me about you coming in.
I didn't exist at that time, Paul. This is why I was just a little minnow.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
I don't know that's true, but I was so excited to go, there's this whole part. And I had grown up in the Catholic education system where you and I both know what the language about that I learned in Australian history about Aboriginal people. And here I was listening to you going, my mind is blowing. This is it. Everything I think I know, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
having to unlearn that's a big task, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought it would be. And I think for lots of people it is because they're like, but this is what I've taught and this is what I've learned. And people, Alvin Toffler said the illiterate of the future are those who can't learn, unlearn and relearn.
Yes, exactly.
And it's the unlearning that people, they don't have to be intentional about, but they do have to be intentional about it. They have to say, I'm prepared to let go of what I think I know and replace it with what I now know.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think you did amazingly well is you made that a dignified process. You could have said, listen, mate, you really don't know because you don't know what you're talking about. And you could have made me feel bad about that, which would have almost reinforced what I thought I knew, but you didn't. You brought me into it and said, you're allowed to do that and you're allowed to let it go. And then you started replacing my knowledge with this incredible, beautiful cultural understanding. That was just the start of it. And I was like, well, what can I do for you? Like, you're giving me this enormous gift. What can I do for you? And I can remember at times saying, can I buy you another coffee? Because I just know this CEO shit. Can I teach you CEO shit if you keep teaching me that? Because I don't want to just take from you.
It was some great bartering.
It was some great bartering.
Yeah,
but it turned out to be a really cool exchange, right? And I felt like so anyway. And one of the things that makes me, when we would have conversations as we led up to the voice and all those sort of different things is, how can corporations and organisations work more closely with their Aboriginal workforce or within community? And I thought, well, we just did it naturally. We sort of went,
it's organic.
I know some stuff. You know some stuff. Can you teach our guys your stuff and I'll teach your guys your stuff and maybe both of us will be better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it turned out, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it worked well. And I think it worked well because, as you said earlier, we kind of just put all the assumptions away and were just two men trying to get answers to questions that we didn't feel safe to ask.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really important lesson out of this. And if anybody else is, thinking along the same lines or have experienced, I guess, a negative outcome from engaging with Aboriginal people or Aboriginal organisations, that we're not all the same. And normally the reactions of Aboriginal people is a traumatic response that our daily experience and existence is traumatic in nature and everything we do. And a lot of people in this country just don't understand that. Now, that's not necessarily their fault that it's happening, but there is a responsibility of learning about it that needs to happen. So one of the greatest pieces of advice that I've ever been given, and I think that was one of your questions actually, was from Uncle Clyde Rigney. So one of the very first elders who were talking about KWY and helped set KWY up in the first instance. He just sat me down out of the blue one day and just said, Craig, life and everything we do in life as people across nature is about relationships. It's all to do with relationships. No matter what it is, if you go into Woolies and you use the checkout and you speak to a person there, you are having a relationship with that person. Buying a coffee, you are having a relationship with the barista. With your parents, with your brother, with your sister, with me, everything's about relationships. And Uncle Clyde rattled off about 40 of those little segues before he actually got to the real meat of what he said to me. And he said, the one thing that you've got that, and the only thing that you're in control of in this world is how you treat other people and how they see you from the way you treat them, which really goes back to the basis of my childhood and being raised from my mum and my stepdad very early on was respect your elders. Treat others as you want to be treated. Some really basic stuff there and good manners. So listening to Uncle Clyde and reflecting on that at every opportunity moving forward, and I think where it's paid dividends for me and for KWY now, 12, 13, 14 years later, is I've been the same version of me.
Yes.
I've been the best version of me that I could be in that entire journey. I wasn't the angry Aboriginal person responding in a traumatic manner because someone asked a silly question. What, do all Aboriginal people do this? Or, I'd rather you feel safe to ask and I can give you my response and we can both learn about that together rather than you having ask a question and me snapping at you where you're not going to feel safe to ask that question ever again of an Aboriginal person. And you're going to take something quite negative away from that experience.
But even the under your leadership, the old saying of the fish stinks from the head down, and the reverse is true.
Yes.
The kindness but firmness of KWY and its success. I had the opportunity to meet with one of your board members and one of your team members, and I was asking my questions, and I asked Sasha, I was like, can I ask this? And she said, and it was amazing. It was very powerful, amazing. She said, you can ask that in this office, but I wouldn't suggest you ask it outside it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, it's such a powerful, it's like this powerfully kind way of sort of going, I appreciate you asking. Possibly your language wasn't quite right or it's not the right place, but also culturally in matriarchal culture, it was just a different way of dealing with it. But rather than telling me off or making me feel bad, she just said, yes, you can, and it was good that you asked it, but I wouldn't do it.
Teaching you.
And she did. Yeah. One of the most powerful things that you taught me really early on from a cultural awareness point of view, and I've taken this way back because it was before I went to the US to do some study was about talking about white fellas and black fellas. And you said, so white fellas are not all white fellas. Like there's Italian ones and Greek ones and Russian ones and East and English ones and Scottish ones and all that sort of stuff. And you said, and black fellas are not all black fellas. There's all the different nations. And that's repeated in First Nations culture around the world.
Yes.
You go to the American Indian culture, and that's First Nation culture, and there's all the different nations. But from a cultural awareness point of view, there's a whole generation of Australians who grew up through a school system going, if black fellas said, all you white fellas, we'd be like, hang on a minute, we're not the same as them. But you grew up with and have grown up and still face to this day people thinking, you have a minister for Aboriginal affairs. Well, it's like saying there's a minister for all white people affairs. Like They're not all the same.
Yes.
But why do we think that that's going to actually do anything? It does something, but it's not going to do all the things, right?
No, that's right.
So I want to loop back to your career as a CEO and your role with KWY. But if it's okay, I'd like to put it in the context of the conversation we had together. For listeners to this who may be from outside of Australia, last year, wasn't it? Last year we had a referendum in Australia about having an Aboriginal voice to Parliament. And in the lead up to that referendum, Aboriginal organisations and Aboriginal causes had a lot of corporate Australia lining up saying we support the voice and aligning itself with what seemed to be very progressive language and accepted, like was really quite encouraging. And then I must admit I was one of those who fell into the trap of being optimistic and thinking, well, it's such a no-brainer, it's just going to happen. So the intense disappointment sort of started early. You could see there's some language here that this is maybe not going to happen even before and then the confirmation of it not happening. So let's not necessarily go into the mourning of how disappointing that was, but I want to focus on an element of it that I find intensely disappointing? Revealing. Let's call it revealing rather than disappointing, because the fact that it's disappointing is a no-brainer. That's revealing. And it's something you and I talked about when I came and asked you the question after The Voice, and was like, so all those corporates that were busting to associate their name with you and other Aboriginal organisations, how many of them have called you in the months after The Voice and said, no, how can we support you more? How can we continue that support? How's that gone, Craig? Should we name them? No, let's not do that.
Well, we can.
We can.
Because it was one. It was one organisation, an NGO, Junction Australia, and it was their CEO, Maria, and one of their executives who, the moment it was official, I mean, you could see the numbers were going against us very quickly. But the moment it was official, both contacted me and said, we are really sorry.
Yeah.
What do we do now? And I probably didn't really have, I guess, an answer that made any sense at the time.
But you weren't inundated with phone calls?
No, one. I mean,
One.
I had friendship and friends like yourself that reached out. But from the sectors that we work in and move in with the other organisations who did line up, who stood alongside us, who came to the rallies, who reached out, who put the S23 logo on their web page and said we're standing strong, one. Just one.
Yeah. And as a result of that conversation, and I hope listeners get the sense of that this is more than words. This is heartbreakingly bad that this happened, where you and I came up with a phrase that we will hope that our listeners will hear and even use. But the idea of, in so many conversations around climate and all those sort of things, you've heard about people talk about virtue signalling. And virtue signalling sounds a bit soft for what happened post The Voice. And I asked you whether or not it was appropriate that we use a phrase called virtue fraud, where people, I think, committed a fraud on Aboriginal organisations by lining up alongside you saying, we support you and we're behind this. If, when it didn't go their way or The Voice didn't come out, they just vanished.
Yeah.
Is that not misrepresentation? Is that not fraud? Is fraud too strong a word, Craig?
No, not at all. I think it's probably hit the nail on the head. I think that word fraud in that context is perfect. If we used anything any stronger, people would get upset with me if I used that. And then, of course, the angry black person just from using different language. So I think virtue fraud, when we sat there and you named it, went, oh, that's virtue fraud. When you told me that story and went, this is it, this is what it is.
Yeah.
It was just a moment that in my mind went, right, now we've got something that we can point at and go.
There's a moment in time where you can see the fraud occur.
Absolutely. And to be able to name it meant a lot, because I could tell you about my feelings. I could tell you a whole narrative around it. And, my response was anger, but I couldn't name what that was. And although there are many organisations that did support leading up and did that, my point was that one reached back into me and said,
we'll continue our support.
We will continue our support.
Mm.
And I guess that said a lot. The lack of voices from the NGO sector, from other organisations or corporations. And look, it might be some of them didn't know how to reach out and say, shit, sorry to hear that. What do we do? How are you feeling? How are you going? What's next for your organisation? I mean, that's what I would have done.
Yeah.
I still would have reached in. I still would have said, let's catch up for a coffee.
How do we keep doing this? It's just a setback.
What do we need to do? What's next?
What's next?
How do we educate?
Yeah.
That 68%.
Yeah.
Thereabouts. So it was definitely heartbreaking, but again, the glass half full for me was a line in the sand from October 13 last year. Was it 13 or 16? I can't remember now. Was right. Now I know exactly who you are and where you sit.
Mm.
And in my eyes, there are a lot of organisations out there stamped with a big virtue fraud logo and a paper mark or watermark, in my mind, who said a lot but did nothing.
Mm. So the challenge for me personally and is that if you are the CEO of one of those organisations, you'll know exactly who you are and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. But the concept of virtue fraud, in terms of, I had one guy when I raised this will make you laugh. I raised this at a dinner table, and he referred to me as, "You're not one of those woke wankers, are you?"
There we go. Yep.
And I was like, well, if I don't, thank you for the label, like woke wanker. And I said, if we're going to be throwing labels around, woke wanker compared to what you are is not too bad. What people say about you.
Yeah.
But calling it, labeling it and dismissing it as woke, it's like, what nonsense this is.
Oh, Paul, you know how many people wouldn't even understand the definition of woke?
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it, how, I mean, you've lived it. I'm only, I'm only living this experience through our friendship, where I'm watching it going, wow, so now you've got a name for me because I'm lining up with you, and now you've got a dismissive name for me.
Yes, you're a sympathiser.
I'm a sympathiser. I'm a woke wanker, audience. I'm a woke wanker, apparently. How quickly in that group, I'm no longer a very successful CEO or an award-winning entrepreneur of the year. I'm a woke wanker and proud of it. But I've not been it's interesting how quickly that dismissal happens, having been a card-carrying member of not a woke political background and all those sort of different things. It's interesting because it's not about, and we're seeing this incredible politicizing now of the world where you've got to be one or the other.
Exactly.
So can't I be neither? I don't want to be associated with woke extremism. I don't want to be associated with white extremism. I want to be engaged in conversations, which is where you and I met, around conversation and exchange of ideas.
Yeah.
And often that your role now, I want to loop back to you almost being swept along to be the accidental CEO, because from that moment of going, oh, I'm a successful CEO now. I didn't necessarily set out to be, but I am now. This is taking off for you as a CEO in a whole nother stratosphere of globally now, as a man who's a CEO, who's an experienced leader in a First Nations experience, which is a global First Nations experience now, of like your place in the world is taking off again, whether you intend for it to happen to you or not, right?
Yeah.
Has it dawned on you that I know you've naturally owned the leadership role you play, but it's got a name now, CEO. You've got 100 staff. You've got an organisation that's constantly growing. It's got responsibilities. It's got systems and processes and payroll and all the things, and it's going to continue to do that. But you've also got a role beyond just being the CEO of your organisation, which is very successful. You're being drawn into a role that transcends that, into a community leadership role. How does that sit with you? Is that something you're embracing? Is it something you're just still trying to figure out? Is it something you're resisting? What happens?
I'll tell you what, the minute I slow down and think about it, I get uncomfortable, because I forget how people perceive me as a CEO. From a little organisation now to 106 or something staff, and forget
in a short period of time.
Yeah. Well, 80% growth of that has been the last 6 years.
Yeah.
And I forget, this is a nice thing. I think this reflects a culture of Karawiwa as a workplace, so the workplace culture, that when people come into the workplace and they're new employees or the organisations that we're working with that don't necessarily know me, haven't met me before, I guess they would look at me as that stereotypical in the first instance, well, here's a CEO and a male CEO straight away. And I forget that because we were so small for so long that everything about me is based on relationships, that I'm a people person, that I certainly don't act like the stereotypical CEO in the corner office and don't come in ever and someone get me a coffee, where I'm out on the floor and I'm engaging with our staff who do the hardest work there is to do and do a bloody good job at it. That it's not till one of the other managers go, they didn't want to engage with you on that level because they're new and you're a CEO. No, I'm just
Craig.
The
CEO.
Yeah, I'm the.
Not even a CEO.
The CEO. I'm like, no, yeah, but I'm just Craig. So I've still got this identity issue going on, Paul, where I don't necessarily see myself as the CEO of an organisation.
So how you see yourself now is you're losing control of because other people see you differently how you see yourself.
Absolutely. And that we all want to be in control of something. So it's about, I guess, taking time to reflect on just the CEO, not even the community leadership part, is to embrace that, but to remember where it came from.
Mm.
You know, that what my journey was, who I learned from, and to do right by them, because I think that's the biggest thing I can ever give back, is to keep in check, to keep listening, to look for that feedback loop as often as possible from as many people as possible. You know, the knockers as well as everyone else that's praising you up. So it's still uncomfortable for me to because in my own mind I haven't changed. And of course, obviously I've grown and I've evolved.
But you've got to play a part now.
Well, this is it. I do have to play a part now. So there's, and I joke about it within the confines of the KWI office space, and when we're running training. Because when I'm running training, I'm facilitator Craig. When I'm doing consultancy, I'm consultant Craig. And when I'm CEO, I'm corporate Craig.
Yeah.
So I've managed to, I guess, box my identities to suit the audience. But they don't stay boxed very long. I think it's in my nature to have a bit of fun and build a relationship with people so they feel they can trust me. As we said earlier, trust is, well, we alluded to, I don't know if we actually said it, but relationships and trust is very, very important. And as an Aboriginal person in this country, we don't have trust. No one trusts us off the mark because we're Aboriginal. We don't trust them. That's a given. That's what we're told every day. So I'm the one, and other Aboriginal people, but in the context of corporate Craig, I'm the one that has to build the trust. I'm the one that has to go out on a limb. I'm the one that has to give something of me first and open myself up and be very, very vulnerable so people can go, oh, actually, all those stereotypes around Aboriginal people or what I've heard about Craig aren't true. Okay, I'm going to lower my barrier down a little bit and engage with Craig over the fence. But my job is to lower that barrier until it no longer exists and they feel free to be themselves with me. And so the onus of building that relationship in this state in the last 15 years has been driven from Aboriginal people having to do that to non-Aboriginal people. Because we're the minority. We don't get anything for something for nothing. Working twice as hard for half as much. So we are the ones that are holding out the olive branch consistently across all aspects of personal and professional life around I'm the one that's got to put up with their attitudes towards me. I'm the one that's got to listen to organisations saying nice things about me. Well, why do I? I'm at a point in my life and my life as a CEO, and KWI is now big enough that we can stand on our own 2 feet and we can start calling some of that behaviour out. And, there's a time and a place and a respectful way to do it, but what I'm finding it needs to be done more and more. Because up till now, who's going to listen to us? Who's going to listen to me? So
I had an interesting conversation. I know you have these conversations every day since I retired from the sector in a full-time capacity. Let's call it that, shall we?
Yeah.
Where I didn't need to be afraid anymore of repercussions from people who hold contracts over your head. I met with a Canberra person, bureaucrat, who we were talking about the recent pricing change in NDIS, but NDIS is just one of many examples of government contracts where on one hand, government says we've built a pay increase into it and leave out the part where it's like, but then we've awarded employees a pay increase that is greater than the increase in the contract value, so therefore you're actually going broke faster. But please do more. And we were having a conversation about this phenomena, the other phenomena of government contracts where they don't build in an indexation. So they give you a 5-year contract, then roll it over for another 2. So you've had 7 years with no inflation, but you've had wage increases every year, and then going, can you do more? You talk about trust and all of those sort of things. There's so many different ways that it gets chipped at. The conversation that I had with her, which again you've probably had in so many different ways, was she said, well, there are so many, she didn't say so many, she said there are too many not-for-profits. And so if some of them fall over as a result of the price cuts, well, that's probably, and I said, oh, too many not-for-profits? And she said, yeah, there was too many. And I said, what's the number you're aiming for? She said, what? I said, well, if there's too many, there must be a right number. What's the number? Because too many is not a number. So you must know a number. What's the number? And she's like, well, and as often is the case, you get this, oh, you're being difficult. So I'm not being difficult. I'm just asking you a question.
Yeah.
Me being difficult is different from me asking you a difficult question.
Absolutely it is, yes.
So labeling me as difficult is just your way of abusing me into saying, no, because I asked you a difficult question. And I suspect now that I don't have to be polite. I could say, you should stop saying that. And she was like, well, it's just, I was like, no,
just stop.
Just stop saying it, because you don't even know whether it's true. Because if you did know it was true, you'd know what the number is. When you've got the number, let me know. But you must hear this kind of stuff all the time. Yeah.
All day, every day, mate.
Yeah.
And it's from those very organisations that had the S23 campaign.
Yeah.
On the, So
where to from here?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's 2024. We sit here in 2029, 5 years from now. Kornar Winmil Yunti is a distant memory as a name, in the sense of that was our origin story. We're KWY.
Yes.
We're 500 people. We're a national organisation. We still got Craig in charge. What is that? Is that what the future holds for you, or is it still going to be organic, or have you got a vision? What's next?
Oh, yeah. It's, I guess my way of thinking about this, and, reading about leadership and listening to podcasts about leadership, and it's great to plan, but there's nothing wrong with planning. There's nothing wrong with being prepared. And I think that's a crucial part. When we talk about scaling up of organisations and being prepared, that's absolutely integral. But you just never know when that growth is going to happen. We've been on this sharp trajectory for so long that I'm still waiting for it to taper off. And it doesn't look like it's going to. But I'm sure it will have to at some point in time. So I guess my plan is to continue planning for it, to be ahead of the curve as much as possible, and be prepared. I mean, it's like the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Just
be ready.
Be ready. Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Expect the losses. Yeah. To lose a contract, to gain a contract, but be in the best position as an organisation you can, that you can help those people that may lose their job from this funding project and bring them into the fold to something that's coming down the pipeline. So, I mean, any CEO, I would think, that's worth their weight at all would always be thinking about the people that he has employed around him and the responsibility he has to them, as well as the job that he's doing. So a big part of my planning process is exactly that, is if we lose something, what are we likely to lose? I mean, it's easy to work on that with block funding.
Yeah.
You know what's coming in, you know what's going out. There is some stability in that, and you get a very good feeling right up to the last minute of what's going to happen one way or the other, normally. I mean, surprises always come at you. So where we are in 5 years, it'll be organic in nature. We will definitely be a national organisation. We're already being pulled into the national sphere now. we're being asked to consult and work in other states around, child protection, homelessness, domestic violence, working with men, working with youth, working with children, foster care, kinship care. And that's exciting for KWY. I never thought we would be here. Absolutely not. Like I said, I don't look that far into the future and plan and hope for that. I'm just planning for what's over the horizon. Horizon 1 or Horizon 2.
It's a shame, isn't it, that there is so much need for that. There's so much growth potential there. One of the things that you and I have talked about for ages in terms of being a CEO worth your salt is not offering certainty when it doesn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah,
so many people think that the opposite of uncertainty is certainty, or that the opposite of complexity is simplicity.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's embracing the fact that it is not simple.
Yeah.
And that the only certainties that you can have is things will go wrong and we will probably fight about it. So why don't we be good at fighting kindly, and why don't we be good at responding to things going wrong?
Absolutely.
And if you do that, which is what you do, is if you're ready to fight kindly and for things to go wrong and fix it, then you can just keep growing the there's no limit to how far you can grow the organisation. You've got to put in more structures and do all that.
Of course, yeah.
But it does come down to the people, doesn't it? Of often.
Absolutely, Paul. I mean, when I'm asked to talk about KWI in a public forum, from our watch or one of those organisations that want us to come and talk, there's a lot of onus that they put on me. Oh, but you've done this and you've built that. And I said, yeah, I have. But the continued growth is because of the people that we have working for us, the people that are part of KWI and the relationships they build with community and other organisations. That is what's important. That's what keeps the growth. That's what helps build culture within the workplace. And someone asked me at our staff day a couple of months ago, how do you personally as a CEO keep this wonderful workplace culture happening? I said, I'm just a droplet in this big pond here. We all are. We're all individuals. So the workplace culture is what you all bring to it. I try and model the culture that I want and have fun and be serious when we need to, and those open, respectful relationship building strategies. But at the end of the day, without the 100 staff, who am I? I'm just a guy sitting in an office all alone.
Many CEOs and founders find the notion of succession planning easy to say, but pretty hard to actually think about, let alone put into place. But certainly thinking about, well, who am I if I'm not doing this? Is it too early in Craig Rigney's journey and too early in KWI's journey for you to be thinking about succession yet? Have you still got lots to do?
Absolutely. I think KWI has lots to do. Interesting. See what I just did then? I took it away from me and put it to KWI.
Let's come back to you.
I've got this identity crisis happening. I think we've talked about this before. It's Craig Rigney, and Craig Rigney is the CEO of KWI, and then there's KWI.
Yeah.
So to respond to that through the lens of KWI, I think we've got a lot of work to do. Sadly, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done out there. And it's interesting because I was in Cairns and I was with one of my executive managers and we were doing some national work for one of the national peak bodies. And for the first time ever, I opened up the conversation and said, I'm 55 this year. Where am I in 5 years? I need a succession plan. That could be you. It may not be you, but it could be you. We need to start thinking about this. And of course, my board have been questioning that just because they're a good board and saying, well, what's the succession plan? What if Craig leaves? What if something happens? What if he gets a better offer, for whatever reason? So I think if I left KWI, let's put it that way, KWI is well placed to continue as they currently are.
Mm.
With all the systems and the support mechanisms and the great leadership that's existing, I think that's fantastic and they'll be okay. I think the brand recognition through some of the work that we do is attached to me.
Mm.
And I think that's the hard part. It's, we want Craig to come and talk. We want Craig to be involved in this.
So part of you becoming a national organisation is about it not being about you.
I know, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
And that's what I'm trying to do. But guess who's at the table and guess who they want to talk to, which is great because it's part of your CEO role.
Yeah.
But I'm already kind of changing the narrative in my responses to some of that. So I don't talk about me as the person. KWI is the entity. So I'm kind of shifting that language and pushing it over there and getting people used to that, if I can be as arrogant to say that, because it has to happen.
One of the key and most challenging things I learned in my CEO experience was going to Stanford with my team, who I loved. I love working with and worked with them for a long time and all those things. And we were there to learn. I remember saying to the chairman, you need to sack me and the rest of the team because none of us have run an organisation this big. Even though we'd created an organisation this big, we're like, we've never worked in an organisation this big, none of us. So you better hire some people who've worked in an organisation this big or teach us how to do it. And so obviously we went off. We went to Stanford Business School and to learn how to be big executives and be a big CEO. And one of the toughest lessons of all was this mentor would throw a challenge on the table for us to work on, and I would start talking about how we're going to go about it, and he'd go, shh, let them do it. And I'd be like, go on then.
Uh-huh.
And they would struggle with it or they would be working through it. These were smart, good people, and really smart people, and I loved them, and they still do. So I would see them sort of suffering, going, I know the answer. And I'd lean, and he could see my body language. I'd lean forward and lean into it. And he'd go, push your chair back. Get out of the group, physically, because they can see you. They can see you leaning, and they can see that you've got the answer. So he said they're not thinking as hard as they could because they'll know that you'll
rescue,
come up with the answer. So he said, push your chair away.
That's great.
And let them do it. I was like, it was like an identity crisis of going, but what if they can do it without me? What if they really are as good as I tell everybody?
Not that what if they get it wrong? That doesn't matter. What if they can do it without me?
Well, that was if you're being honest with yourself and you look in the mirror as a long-term CEO, as a long-term organisation creator, as somebody who's put your heart and soul into something, succession planning is something that's easy to say.
Yeah.
But putting yourself in a situation where you've got to watch it and not do anything is really hard.
Oh, how many times have you spoken to someone that's just retired and, they struggled with being retired? And then all of a sudden they find their place and go, I've never been so busy.
Yep.
They've adjusted. So, I don't know how or what that would look like for me. I mean, you've been through it. And
yeah, well, I have. I've never been busy. I didn't have time to work.
So I'm not so worried about myself in that question. Where's Craig and all of that? Well, if Craig's out of the picture, Craig's consulting. And I think there's a part of that which gives me some ease, I guess, to know that there are still agencies out there that want to engage, still feel that I've got something to give, to teach, to offer. And I'm getting job offers all the time and
Of course you are.
consultancy all the time. And I'm like, well, no, I'm a CEO over here. I'm not finished here yet. Or they're not finished with me yet, more so. So when Caterpillar outgrows me and the time is right and everyone agrees to that as best we can, I think I'll be comfortable knowing that I'll probably be just as busy doing something else.
So let's book in for 2029. I'm sure our audience will want to, they can wait that long, but we'll book in for 2029 and see what your answer is.
Yeah.
And then when you're approaching the big 6-0 and still fresh and young and got lots of ideas.
Yeah, it's a long way away.
All right, let's get into some really serious questions now. You're driving along in the car on the way out to down south in the country where you live, and a song comes on the radio. What song comes on the radio that still makes you smile every time, no matter what mood you're in?
Oh, pretty much anything from the 80s will take me straight back to that. Feel good.
Yeah.
80s. But lately, and when I say lately, probably for the last 5-7 years, it's been Donna Summer. When I hear one of her songs come on, there's just something about that woman's voice that's happy and uplifting that it just changes my mood completely. So I've created this little Spotify list where if I've had a pretty ordinary day, that's my go-to list for driving home.
Awesome. Fantastic.
So it just changed because I don't need to be home in a mood and carry that with me. I want to leave that behind.
Yeah. It's interesting you and I have that in common as well. When I would come home and my whole family would know, I would walk in the front door, turn into my room, take off whatever I was wearing, put on something else, and I would come back out the door, a different person.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing, but it's that ritual of taking off your work so you don't bring it into the house and putting on
it's
something
really
different.
important. I mean, I'm lucky that that my wife, Ingrid, works in the same sector or did work in the same sector, now works in disability. But so the conversations, if I pick her up, she only works 2 days a week now in the city, so it's only 2 trips in and out that I get to spend with her. But we can debrief. And that allows that to happen reasonably quickly. Or I'll call the executive management team, the 4 or 5 people and go, how's your day? I didn't get to see you. Everything okay? Are you okay? Don't you go home and be like, I want you to leave that.
Yeah.
And that helps me as well.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of just saying, I'm saying it out loud to someone else, but I'm doing it myself.
Yeah.
You're good. All right. Go home, enjoy the night with your family and go for a walk, whatever you do. So that's part of that process. And it's interesting. It for me, it's not the drive home after a bad day. It doesn't bother me. I can get out of that pretty quickly. It's the drive in to the unknown, which stresses me out way more.
Wow.
Way more. What is today going to bring? But not, and that sounds really negative, but there's a lot of excitement with that as well. It's like, okay, what's today going to bring?
Yeah.
Instead of what's today going to bring? What's today going to bring? So but with that certainly comes a fair bit of stress. It's like, okay, we've got some big things happening. Where are we at? I'm waiting to hear from, the contract manager. Have we got that contract? Have we not got that contract? Where's it? What are the lawyers saying? What have they said about, this and all the rest of it? So we're juggling, and, to the audience of CEOs, we're juggling so many balls that in the air that unless you're in it, you really don't truly appreciate just how many things we're juggling at once.
Isn't it one of the most perverse, fun things you can do when you've been on holidays as a CE and someone's been sitting in for you and you come back and they're like, you could have it. You go, you work with me every day. How hard could it be?
Yeah.
And they're like, there's the queue that goes up and around the corner and all of the things and everybody's at you and you're like, yeah, that's the part.
Great for the ego. But, it does give other people a bit of appreciation. But also some great reflection on yourself as well.
Yeah.
When you go away and you come back and to let go. I mean, it wasn't until last year really that I had my first, I guess, decent holiday of 5 or 6 weeks. And very quickly was able to, because I trusted and knew the people around me that were looking after the organisation were brilliant. So I didn't need to do the check-ins, and I didn't need to check in from overseas.
Yeah.
If anything, they would send me a text and go, everything's great, relax, stop checking your emails. I thought we weren't going to do that. So, you know, there is this yin and yang that happens in our brains, and, you know, I've never done any study to be a CEO, but I'm sure it's something that's very common amongst all of us, is all of these things floating around in the brain that you may be taught, but until you're in it, until you experience, I mean, lived experience 101.
Yeah.
And I'm learning every day and making mistakes every day, but trying not to make the same mistakes every day. That's the hard part. But the beauty of that is that it allows you to constantly reflect every day on who you are, your practice, your communication style. You know, oh, I think I snapped and, you know, really said something quite sharp and blunt to Joe Blow, instead of just going, hey, thanks for the great work, I appreciate what you've done. They caught me at a bad moment, to then be able to go, sorry, Joe, that was all me, not you.
Yeah.
And normally, and when I do that and do that regularly, we understand. We could see the stress on your face, which then I'm now reflecting, go, they could see stress on my face?
Yeah.
Okay, what's going on? So again, there's these feedback loops everywhere if you're willing to listen to it. If you don't listen to it, stuff's just going to build up and your cup's just going to overflow and spillage is going to happen and it's going to come out in a not so nice way eventually. So I think that the importance of your own social and emotional well-being and having peers or mentors and colleagues and an opportunity to know what helps you de-stress and what keeps you in check and where your social and emotional well-being is really important to be able to do that, know it and listen to it. And it's often underestimated, it's often overlooked because we're too busy.
Too busy.
And
what a great set of lessons for anybody who wants to be a CEO or who is a CEO who's freaking out right now because their hair's on fire. Like, make sure, listen to what Craig just said in the last 5 minutes over and over and over. Yeah. Craig, it has been awesome, and I'm sure our audience can see why I was so excited to have you along today. It's awesome. So thank you very much. Everybody, Craig Rigney is the best.
Cheers, everybody.